Let's talk a little bit about alfalfa weevil. Weevils overwinter as adults. Briefly, they seek out alfalfa to lay eggs in the spring. There's 4 larval stages. The first 2 are kind of hard to find. They don't do a lot of feeding, but that is the stage we want to be scouting for because the 3rd and 4th instar can cause significant defoliation and potentially yield loss. Weevils are an occasional pest, and that bothers me a little bit because sometimes the occasional pests are more difficult to deal with than the key pests that we know about and scout for, manage each and every year. So the occasional pests, we may not remember the life cycle, we may not know how to treat for them, the economic thresholds and things like that. So sometimes the occasional pests are more of a bother. To scout for weevils, in the upper Midwest, we suggest scouting at about 300 weevil degree days. That's when those eggs are first hatching. You can keep track of the degree days yourself, or go to your county extension office and ask them if they know of any local sources of degree days. That local source may not be in your state, it may be in an adjacent state where you can zoom out and still get the degree days for your area. So at about 300 degree days is the time to start scouting for weevils, and you can back that up a little bit more by going to south-facing slopes, sandy knolls. Those are areas that will warm up just a little bit quicker. Each and every state has their own suggested scouting protocol for weevils. I'm not hung up on any one versus the other. The biggest thing is to get out and scout for weevils so you don't get caught by surprise. Briefly, the one that I'm more familiar with is picking stems. Go walk a W-shaped pattern in the field, anything that's representative of the whole field. Pick out 50 stems, the top 8 to 10 inches of that stem, throw them in your other hand, make a little bouquet, then at the end go through each stem looking for damage. So for example, if you picked 50 stems, 25 of those stems had damage, you had 50% tip feeding. That's not to suggest you had 50% defoliation, just that 50% of the stems had some degree of feeding. Then I would like to maybe take a sweep net through the alfalfa field because there's only one generation. What you're using that sweep net for is just to see that weevils are still present. And if they are, and you're over the economic threshold that we have used in Wisconsin of 40% tip feeding, then spray. And finally, in those fields where we've had significant yield loss, do check the second crop regrowth to make sure that the weevils are not feeding on those newly forming spring or second growth stems.